Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to today's webinar on best practices in high-containment tablet compression system design and execution. My name is Megan Parrish. I am the Senior Editor for Pharma Manufacturing Magazine, which is producing today's event. Today's event is also sponsored by Korsch America. Today, we're going to talk about how the successful implementation of a high-containment tablet compression capability requires a detailed assessment of the required operator exposure limit, or OEL, and the subsequent system engineering to select suitable peripherals and make-or-break connections to ensure this OEL is achieved. This presentation will focus on the methodology to assess the OEL requirement and will review the current state-of-the-art technology around contained tablet press design and the integration of contained peripherals to achieve a turnkey system. In this webinar, you will learn how to skillfully migrate from an OEB determination and a conceptual design to full execution in Smeatpack testing. You'll also discover the latest advancements in wash-in-place, high-containment tablet manufacturing, hear about the critical role of peripheral equipment, make-or-break connections, and the benefits of integrated HMI control. And we'll also explore how engineering innovation is being applied to OEB3, OEB4, and OEB5 containment applications. To complement this discussion, we will have a live audience-driven Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please submit your questions as they occur to you. Now, before I introduce our speaker, there are a few housekeeping issues that I'd like to review. On the interface we're using for this webinar, you'll see several different boxes or sections. Importantly, the audio section on the upper part of your screen allows you to adjust the volume. If you need to adjust the volume, just hover over this section until you see the audio volume control pop up, and then you can adjust it. Below that is the ever-important Ask a Question box. At any time during today's presentation, you can type your question for our presenter right here, and we'll get to your question during the Q&A session. And if you're having technical problems, you can also simply type in your question or concern in the Q&A box, and one of our technical engineers will jump in to help. To the left of the Ask a Question box is our handouts area. Here you'll find additional information available for download. And then in the largest section, you'll see today's presentation slides displayed. Then below the slides, there's also a live chat box. This is a good place to chat with other webinar attendees if you want. But importantly, this is not a good place to put or to submit a question for a Q&A section, because this is not where I'm going to go looking for those questions later. Also, you can always enlarge a section by clicking on the square box in the top right corner of that section next to the X. And importantly, if you accidentally close out a section, don't panic. You can get back to it by clicking the refresh button at the bottom of the screen. This webcast also will be archived. We encourage you to direct coworkers to the recorded presentation. It's going to also be available on the Pharma Manufacturing Magazine website. We've also recently added a Q&A feature to our on-demand presentation so that listeners can ask the speaker a question and it'll be passed along to them. One final note, we ask that you respond to the feedback form at the end of our presentation. Your answers truly do help us improve future events. And now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Fred Murray is the president of Korsch America, based in Boston, and the Director of Global Sales for Korsch AG, which is based in Germany. Fred has been with Korsch for 32 years and has taught courses on the concepts of tablet compression, automation, multi-layer technology, tablet press containment, and tablet press troubleshooting. And with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Fred.
Thank you, Megan. Sincere thanks to Pharma Manufacturing for the platform to make the technical presentation today, and good afternoon from Boston. I'm going to speak today about high-containment tablet compression systems. And to start, I've been around, as the bio said, for over 30 years, and there's some clear trends developing that are driving this technology. More new products are being developed that are potent and that require some level of contained processing, coupled with an increased desire by many environmental health and safety groups to minimize or eliminate PPE. In addition, many existing products that are currently operating on standard or minimally contained tableting machines with the operator in full-time PPE are facing the same scrutiny where EHS is looking to move away from that PPE requirement. And finally, in the early phase development, early scale, where there's new compounds, where the safety is not completely characterized, obviously containment becomes a critical consideration. So the presentation today is going to talk a little bit about Korsch expertise, the background and some of the experience. We're going to talk about maybe the most critically important aspect is determining the containment level that's required. We're going to talk about OEB3, sometimes referred to as a medium containment, that is also a dry containment technology. OEB4 and 5 technology, which is wash-in-place or high-containment technology. We'll talk about the importance of matching appropriate system peripherals into a full turnkey system. And we'll talk a little bit about centralized and integrated control. To start, a contained tablet press is very much a different animal from a standard tablet press. The level of complexity is significant, and it really requires expertise and experience to execute these types of projects. Korsch, I think as most of you know, is a company based in Berlin, Germany. We've been focused on core competency of tablet compression equipment for over 100 years. And in fact, 1 year ago today, we had the entire company in Berlin for our 100-year centennial celebration, which seems like a long, long time ago. All Korsch machines are made in Germany, designed, developed, and manufactured, tested, and the line of equipment spans from early feasibility through product development, small-scale clinical batch, continuous process, high-speed production, multi-layer, including bilayer, tri-layer, 4- and 5-layer technology, as well as high containment and wash-in-place solutions. From a containment standpoint, we have over 20 years experience in designing, developing, and executing a wide range of contained systems. And really the emphasis from our perspective is on turnkey execution. That means from URS review and compliance statements through full project management, system design, peripheral selection, integration of all the tablet press to all the peripherals, the full control system integration, so there's a single HMI, through FAT, SAT, and finally Smeatpack testing. Over that time, we've executed more than 60 medium containment installations and over 50 wash-in-place installations. And in my 30 years, I've certainly had hands in quite a number of those projects. The Korsch product line with regard to high containment and wash-in-place solutions spans early feasibility through development and scale-up, through mid-range production, high-speed production, as well as multi-layer production. So really a complete line of wash-in-place, high-containment technology for virtually every application. So to set the stage for the discussion of containment, let's talk about operator exposure levels and the bands that are frequently referred to when in talking about containment solutions. In general, there's a numerical band, OEB1 through OEB5, that dictate or describe various levels of containment. OEB1 is generally not in the discussion. OEB2 would be a standard tablet press with a simple dust collector. No containment mitigation, no containment technology, and delivering containment level of 100 to 1,000 micrograms per cubic meter, which essentially is very low containment. When we move into really medium containment, that's an OEB3 or 10 to 100 microgram per cubic meter range. Beyond that, OEB4 is 1 to 10 and OEB5 is less than 1. Now you're in a wash-in-place requirement. So that is essentially a summary and really determining where your product needs to be and what will drive the design of the system is the correct calculation of what your OEL is going to be. So let's start with some terminology. So the OEL, the operator exposure limit, describes the airborne concentration of the active substance in micrograms per cubic meter within the operator's breathing zone over a period of 8 hours. The occupational exposure band, OEB, that is what we just went through. That is that indicates, let's say, the toxicity level of the substance. So that means the active material when you look at the MSDS, what does that MSDS say with regard to that substance on a scale of 1 to 5? And then the design exposure limit is the calculated exposure that we're going to utilize for the project. Let me elaborate. So a couple of examples. If we take a high active concentration that has a lower toxicity, for example, hormones or steroids, antivirals, the MSDS can reflect an OEL of 4.0 micrograms per cubic meter, but in the granulation with a drug load of 35%, the calculated DEL is 11.4 micrograms per cubic meter, which lands us in an OEB3 project requirement. Similarly, with a low active concentration and high toxicity active, let's say a cytotoxic, if the active in the MSDS has an OEL of 0.3 micrograms per cubic meter, which is in itself OEB5, but the drug load is 8% in the granulation, then the design exposure limit is 3.75, which puts us in an OEB4 range. So the take-home message, and perhaps maybe the most important message that I'm trying to convey in this presentation, is that consideration of the dilution of the active in the blend is a critical determinant of what the design criteria for the contained system needs to be. To illustrate this in another way, on the left, dust tight, or let's say non-contained, that is an OEB2 standard press, standard windows, dust collection system hooked up, so a negative pressure inside the compression zone, but generally not monitored. So that's really a standard execution, no containment technology whatsoever. The OEB3, or medium containment level, again, is a dry containment, which will get us to a range of 10 to 100 micrograms per cubic meter. And then anything less than 10, we're in a wash-in-place, a high containment execution where it's not a window, but a barrier isolator, which is surrounding the compression zone. If we look at a typical P&ID process and instrumentation diagram for a contained system, you've got the tablet press, you've got a deduster and metal check, you've got a wash-in-place tablet tester, a wash-in-place skid, you've got an air inlet HEPA filter, in some cases a dryer, and in all cases you've got these make-break connections. In other words, you need to get powder into the press, and you need to get tablets out of the press and through the peripheral equipment. And there are then make-break connections. So in these transition areas where material is entering or tablets are leaving, you need to maintain containment and select appropriate connections that match the design requirement for the project. So in this case, you could be talking about split butterfly valves. You could be talking about liner systems. Another key requirement is contained intervention during processing. In other words, in some cases, it's necessary to go into the press while the batch is running to stop the machine temporarily, to change a punch, for example, if it's picking or sticking, to change the angle of the takeoff if you're getting jams or chipped tablets. And having to open a window and break containment is generally not an option, or if it is, it's a very inconvenient and expensive one. So the ability to reach into the machine through a glove port, an RTP, which is interlocked to the control system, is a critical part of it. Selecting peripheral equipment, that is OEB3 or OEB4 wash-in-place, in other words, that matches the containment requirement for the project, is certainly critical. And interfacing these components together so that all the utilities, air, water, the plumbing, valves, make-break connections, all need to be in the same class. The dust collection system or air handling system, which will give you contained collection of dust as well as automatic control of the negative pressure, again, a critical design consideration. So as you can see from a not very complex drawing, there are many considerations and many engineering decisions that need to be made when you start to formulate a system. We're going to take a quick question from you. So there's some polling questions that are in this system that manufacturing allows us to ask, and we'd appreciate if you'd go ahead and submit your answer, and we will assess that after the presentation. So we appreciate if you take just a minute and give us your feedback there. If we talk about OEB3 containment or medium containment, as I said, that is a range of 10 to 100 micrograms. That is typically, obviously, a closed system with dust extraction, negative pressure control, and glove ports, but it's generally not a wash-in-place solution. If you talk about an OEB3 features on a standard tablet press, so in other words, a tablet press which is upgraded to an OEB3 execution, in general, we start with locks and improved seals around the windows, but they're windows. It's not an isolator. They're standard press windows. Tri-clamp connections on the material inlet and the tablet discharge chute outlet that would allow you to connect liner systems or split butterfly valves. Glove ports around the machine perimeter in specific locations that give you access to key parts of the compression zone, including the discharge chute, tablet takeoff, the ability to remove an upper or lower punch, for example, an RTP port, which would allow you to pass through a hand tool or an upper or lower punch, a split butterfly valve, which we mounted on top, the inlet HEPA filter, which is really as the dust extraction draws air from the compression zone, the makeup air is coming from the room that passes through the HEPA filter. More importantly, the HEPA filter prevents any blowback. That means if for any reason the compression zone is not negative, it prevents any active from being blown back into the room. So that HEPA filter serves those dual purposes. There's also negative pressure monitoring. That means we have a delta pressure sensor in the compression zone, which is used to drive closed-loop control of the air handling system to maintain a negative pressure, generally somewhere between 80 and 100 pascals. If we talk about liner systems, clip and cut systems, these systems allow us to sample tablets in a contained manner. So generally where they're located, as you see in this diagram, this is on a metal-checked reject. So if a tablet is detected as having metal in it, it'll reject the tablet. And with this clip and cut liner, we can take these samples away for assessment in a contained manner. These liner systems are also generally used to collect tablet rejects from the press itself, tablet samples from the press itself to bring those to another, perhaps an isolator for measurement of weight, thickness, and hardness. Continuous liners are offered by a number of manufacturers with different sizes and containment levels. This particular system is from a Pharma Technology combi unit. Pharma Technology, as you know, is based in Belgium. If we talk about OEB4, OEB5, that is now in the wash-in-place, clearly in a wash-in-place requirement. That means a DEL of somewhere less than 10 micrograms. 1 to 10 is OEB4, and less than 1 is OEB5. Now we're talking about a barrier isolator, not a standard window. We're talking dust extraction, negative pressure control, wash-in-place requirements, as well as the glove ports and RTP for contained access. If we look at features of a standard high-containment wash-in-place machine, now you're talking about a very different construction. Around the machine compression zone is a barrier isolator, and in most cases, it's using inflatable seals. These inflatable seals are monitored in real time to ensure the integrity of the containment. The glove ports and RTP are, as what I described on the OEB3, that are mounted in a strategic way to permit access to the compression zone. In this case, with a wash-in-place machine, these glove ports also permit access to spray wands, which can be accessed inside the compression zone, so that you can, for instance, wash down the machine with a manual spray nozzle or go to a particular area of the machine. And after the whip sequence, the same nozzle can be used with a compressed air supply to blow off and facilitate drying. So the placement of those glove ports is important. This particular picture is showing a transfer and washing isolator where the parts can be transferred from the press to this isolator and also washed offline, for example. In the same way, we use tri-clamp connections on the material inlet and on the discharge chute outlet. For good, bad, and sample tablets, there is negative pressure control, again, generally 80 to 100 millibar with closed-loop control to the air handling system. That air handling system will ramp up, for example, if any breach in the glove, any of the glove ports is detected. The inlet air filter is as described previously, so dual purposes. It's bringing air from the room, makeup air, into the compression zone, and is providing a block and an assurance that no active material can be blown back into the room if for any reason you don't maintain the negative pressure. If we talk about the wash-in-place environment, it's a very different execution than a standard press. The wash-in-place nozzles are required to wet all the surfaces and eliminate all the airborne particulate at the end of the batch. So in other words, the machine is locked, the isolator is closed, the machine is tight, and a wash-in-place recipe is executed, which is going to make the press safe to clean and open. There's certainly misnomers around CIP and WIP, and many people want to use those terms interchangeably, which technically is not correct. CIP infers that the machine is clean to a swabbable standard, and I would submit over 30 years experience that is a very, very unlikely scenario, depending fully on the solubility of the active. More likely and more common is the wash-in-place, where that whip sequence makes the machine safe to clean and open. But the idea that you're ready to go with the next batch after a whip cycle is complete is generally unrealistic. The spray nozzle design, so these are nozzles that have different arcs, different widths, different spray patterns that are mounted in the compression zone to ensure wetting of all the surfaces. The whip recipe is built into the HMI, so for each whip zone, the operator can set, or generally the administrator can set a duration. We'll wash through the entire system, including the split butterfly valve, all the way down through the press and all peripherals, and the recipe allows that process, once optimized, to be repeated on a consistent basis. And again, it's important that that whip recipe capability in the HMI comprehends not only the press, but also the entire set of peripherals, from the containment valves through the deduster metal check, through the tablet tester, through the, in most cases, the air handling system also has a wash-in-place capability. The duct between the air handling system and the press is washable. So everything that has any product contact is going to be wetted. If we talk a little bit further about exactly what the design looks like, split butterfly valves are generally provided with a wash hood. So on the top of the press, we provide not only a mechanical mount, but also the services, including the nozzles to wet the split butterfly valve. That feeds down through the feed pipe and the feeder. The feeder is generally running. It's been emptied with a vacuum wand, which is inside the compression zone through the glove ports in advance. And then the entire system, including the inside of the feeder, is wetted. We go from top to bottom, so the die table, turret, lower shrouds, as I said, the dust collection duct to the air handling system, and each of these nozzles individually controlled and triggered through a recipe. In general, there is a series of wash stages and rinse stages. You have the technology, let's say, permits either the simple use of potable water, which is often used, or in many cases there are a whip skid that provides heated detergents and also purified water. A whip recipe is generally configured in the HMI. That sets the sequence and duration. It is determined empirically. The cleaning validation, or let's say the process to ensure that the machine is safe to open once the whip process is complete, that is tested and verified, and that recipe can then be implemented in a repeatable way. The system should permit automatic storage and retrieval of the whip recipes, which may be different depending on the active and the product. Typically, there are administrative controls around the recipe management. And again, it's critical that the whip sequence comprehend everything from the split butterfly valve through the tablet press and all related peripherals. With regard to drying, I did reference earlier that I think the most common methodology is to utilize a compressed air nozzle through the glove port to blow the air off the surfaces and down out of the compression zone. It is possible to use a dryer on the inlet air supply, so a dehumidification unit and heated air, but there's always a concern that if you heat the turret, it's going to require, that acts like a heat sink, that's going to require some time before you can start again, so that will typically increase the downtime or the change time if you do use a heated drying option. When we talk about the isolator, it's really a critical component. The coarse machine is typically, the design of it is an open and accessible machine without corner columns, which lends itself very well to the application of a barrier isolator around the compression zone. The inflatable seals ensure an absolutely tight seal, and those inflatable seals are monitored in real time, so you can ensure the integrity of the seal. Most systems are going to permit you to conduct a leak test on demand, so of course during the FAT and SAT, but even before each batch, a leak test to verify that the seal or the integrity of the seal is intact before you start. The air handling system has a negative pressure control, so that will do a couple things. The air handling system will not only do the negative pressure control and maintain the precise negative pressure in the compression zone, but it will also provide an ability to do contained dust extraction, so that it will collect the dust, and typically it will use a liner system to allow you to, at the end of the batch, collect the dust for any kind of batch reconciliation. If you look at the machine open, you can probably see fairly quickly that this is not a standard compression zone. When you work in a wash-in-place environment where the whip media can be a detergent and with a temperature up to 40 or 60 degrees C, the materials of construction in the compression zone need to change rather significantly. In this case, everything is 316 stainless. We utilize composite cams that can withstand the temperature and detergents. All the connections, electronics, are IP65 to ensure that they're waterproof. And unlike most conventional presses where we use shrouds to try to cover cam tracks and so forth, in the wash-in-place machines, we want just the opposite. We need access to those things so that we can wet them during the wash-in-place cycle so that all surfaces can be wetted and all airborne particulate can be removed. If we talk about now peripherals and make-break connections, this is extremely important. There's almost nobody out there that's running a contained tablet press without mating peripherals that must not only be integrated from a control perspective, but they need to be in the same containment class and deliver a system containment performance that meets the requirements of the project. A typical containment system. Let's look at a typical layout. We've got a tablet press. We have which is wash in place, high containment. We've got a wash in place deduster metal check system connected to the good channel. That system is often provided with its own washing trolley. In some cases, that deduster metal check is filled with water via the washing trolley. In some cases, it's washed via the press whip sequence. Beyond that, there's a tablet tester, which is under the sample chute of the discharge chute. There's an air handling system, which is itself wash in place. There's a duct to the air handling system, which has to be washed during the whip sequence. There is a wash in place skid, a whip skid, which is delivering media at the prescribed rate with detergents, temperatures, and so forth. And there are tanks or optional tanks can be provided for heated or purified media. I'm going to stop again and ask one more polling question to get a sense of what you're thinking about the future. We're certainly seeing a trend in that direction, but we'd appreciate your feedback, and I'm just going to give a second for you to help us out with some feedback there. Okay, if we continue on with the whip peripherals, this is a deduster metal check, which is in itself a wash-in-place system. There are deduster metal checks that are offered in both OEB3 and OEB4 5, so whip capability. This unit is from Pharma Technology. It's got a high lifting height. Generally, I think maximum height is around 1.25 meters. This has a drop down through a metal check, the collection of tablets from that metal check. This has a manual split butterfly valve into an IBC. The HMI on this unit does have its own pressure decay for integrity of the seal, integrity of the containment monitoring, but that is generally also incorporated or integrated to the tablet press HMI. There are other companies that make high containment combi units. Kramer out of Switzerland and Pharma Technology out of Belgium are probably the two best technologies out there. Most of these systems are going to allow, or certainly they require, the ability to test the metal check without breaking containment. In this case, there's a compartment which would allow you to drop a test tablet through the metal check without disturbing containment, so you can check in line that the metal detector is operating fine. For the wash-in-place tablet tester, there's not very many options out there. This is a Kramer UTS IP65i. That is a wash-in-place tester that measures individual tablet weight, thickness, and hardness. So the HMI will sample tablets at a preset sample size and interval, send those tablets in a group or individually to a tablet tester where we measure individual weight, thickness, and hardness. The average weight is compared to a target weight, and there's closed loop feedback to the press force control system so that the machine is essentially regulating itself. There are also optional feedback loops around tablet thickness and tablet hardness. That system is, again, wash in place and is integrated to the whip recipe and part of the whip sequence. This is a whip skid, wash-in-place skid offered by LB Bola. This unit offers the ability to introduce two different detergents depending on the solubility of the active. It allows really a four-stage wash, pre-wash, main wash, pre-rinse, and final rinse. There's options to add a heated buffer tank if you want to deliver heated media, purified water. Again, this system has its own HMI, but when the system is integrated in a turnkey project, the tablet press HMI is controlling the system downloading the recipe and ensuring that the correct whip recipe is executed by the system. If we talk about a contained air handling system, again, the system serves two key purposes. First of all, it maintains a preset negative pressure in the compression zone. It ramps fan speed if it detects any breach in the glove, and it provides contained dust extraction with dust collections for reconciliation at the end of the batch. These systems are generally based on closed-loop volumetric control, and again, are controlled directly via the tablet press HMI. If we talk about split butterfly valves, there's quite a number of those valves on the market. These are really required to permit contained feeding of the granulation, let's say from the IBC into the entry of the tablet press on the headpiece. There's many makes, models, and containment capabilities out there. Among the, let's say, the key players is the GLAT TKS, the GEA buck valve, ChargePoint, and Andoc also make high-quality split butterfly valves. As I indicated previously, we put a mechanical mount on the headpiece of the machine. We provide the services and the controls for that valve so that the HMI for the press is monitoring the status of the valve to know if it's undocked, closed, docked and closed, or docked and open. In general, the docked and opened is a run permissive to ensure that the IBC is docked and locked and open before the tablet press can run. So again, regardless of who makes the SBV, it's important to have the integration of the system through the tablet press HMI. Once we do the engineering and bring a system together, which includes the tablet press, all the peripherals, the air handling system, deduster, metal check, tablet tester, it's generally required or certainly desirable to conduct Smeatpack testing. Now, most of the vendors have conducted Smeatpack testing on the unit operations themselves. In other words, if you buy a deduster metal check, they'll have a Smeatpack test for that unit in and of itself in a standalone. We have the same for the tablet presses. But when you consider a system now where you're matching press to peripheral, make-break connections, split butterfly, it's often a requirement to make a Smeatpack test on the entire system. So Smeatpack means standardized measurement of equipment particulate airborne concentration. So essentially, in layman's terms, we're verifying the containment capability of the system by conducting a test which is certified according to Smeatpack and ISP guidelines. Smeatpack testing is generally conducted by a third party where they bring in a series of sensors that are placed in key positions around the press. We use lactose as a surrogate. We run the machine through a number of operations, including feeding, tablet compression, tablet collection, dedusting, and so forth, whip, open the windows after a whip sequence, and it's measuring airborne particulate. And of course, this is a documented way to prove that the containment capability, the design requirement has been met with the full system assembled and in operation. Finally, let me talk about the importance of integrated control. So as you saw in many of the slides, the tablet press has an HMI. The metal detector deduster unit has an HMI. The air handling unit has an HMI. The whip system has an HMI. And to have one operator run around to 4 or 5 different HMIs to sequence and manage the interaction of these machines is really a non-starter. So a critical consideration and maybe the biggest advantage of a turnkey system is to ensure central control. What that means is that all the functions for the press, the peripherals, the whip unit, tablet tester, air handling system, whip skid, containment valves, that is all being controlled through a single HMI. That means integrated electronic audit trails, event logs, alarm history, product recipes, the integrated WIP sequence, so that the WIP recipe is executed and that all peripheral devices are managed in the same way, so the WIP recipe can be executed correctly. That HMI should also facilitate some level of network integration, either for centralized login or for central product recipe. That HMI should have the capability to pass data to a central SCADA or historian system through an OPC server, for example. And finally, that system should be able to communicate with a supervisory system if the wash-in-place press is placed into a continuous process line, which is something that we're seeing definitely some interest with the combination of high containment and continuous processing. So that, I hope, provides an overview of the state-of-the-art presently in contained systems for tablet compression equipment. I would emphasize again that it is the correct determination of the OEB range and setting up the proper design criteria, which is really the key starting point. Every URS has to start with that, an assessment of the actives, the dilution, and the required containment level. And from that, the selection of the press, specification, peripherals, integration, make-break connection, containment valves, then everything follows from there. So with that, I would first thank everyone for their time today and turn it back over to Megan to see if we have questions that I'd be happy to address.
Great. Thank you so much, Fred, for that thorough and interesting presentation. Just a reminder, everyone, before we jump into the Q&A session, if you would like to submit a question to Fred, please submit it in the Ask a Question /technical support box, sort of on the left-hand side of your screen. We have a few minutes yet to go through some questions with Fred, so feel free to submit your questions here. Just a reminder, too, if we do not get to your question during the live Q&A session, we will forward your question to Fred so that he can follow up at a later time. I do have some questions rolling in, Fred, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. First question, can you compare the magnitude of capital investment for OEB3 and OEB4/5 applications?
Sure. So that's I think, an important point to emphasize. And really underscores the importance of getting the OEB specification correct. So an OEB3, going from a standard tablet press and upgrading it to an OEB3 capability can add about 15 to 20% to the price of the machine. So a very nominal investment, but in many cases, reaching a medium containment level of 10 to 100 micrograms, which is sufficient for the application. By contrast, when you go to a wash-in-place high-containment tablet press execution, that means a different compression zone in terms of materials of construction, a full barrier isolator. Now you take a standard tablet press and the price difference, the capital investment, is somewhere between 2.5 and 3 times the price of a standard machine. So there is a dramatic difference between OEB3 and OEB4 and 5 with regard to capital investment. And again, that's why the assessment up front of the containment level is really, really critical.
Okay, great. The next question I have for you is, what are the advantages of going with a turnkey system?
So as I indicated, all the machines that come together in the system that I presented today, those all have their own HMI, in some cases to facilitate calibration or standalone operation. But trying to ask an operator to run a handful of HMIs on a machine, a system of this complexity, is really unmanageable. A turnkey system starts with the URS review and a compliance statement, and then the engineering to select suitable peripherals and make-break connections. Again, the common HMI is a critical aspect of it. It's the only real reasonable way to operate a system of that complexity, to execute product recipes, WIP recipes, to ensure that run permissives, the presence of negative pressure, the proper sequence of the lock dock on the containment valve, that's all in place before running. It's not like a regular machine where if you make a mistake, you might have a yield problem. If there's a problem with a contained machine, of course the consequences can be higher. So the importance of integration, run permissives, redundancy in that integration is critical. Smeatpack testing of the entire system is also, I think, an important consideration, which drives a turnkey approach, and having one hand do the design engineering, the implementation, the execution, as well as the Smeatpack testing. We've done systems based on a Siemens platform and also on an Allen Bradley PLC platform, which some customers require. And so the controls platform is also a critical consideration when you're talking about a fully integrated system. And finally, I would say, and I don't think it requires too much explanation, that the documentation, validation requirements around a contained system are significantly greater than those around a standard tablet press. And so to have a single vendor with a turnkey approach that can deliver the full documentation, validation protocols that incorporate not only the functionality of the press, but the functionality of the integrated peripherals is a critical advantage, and in my mind, really a must-have in terms of a turnkey system.
Okay, wonderful. Next question I have for you. What is the typical duration of a WIP cycle, including the press and all peripherals?
So our experience is that a typical WIP cycle duration is somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes. That generally is comprised of 8 to 10 WIP zones that are triggered sequentially. They start with the wash hood on the split butterfly valve above the machine, and then proceed to a number of spray nozzles that wet the feed pipe, the feeder, upper turret, die table, lower turret, tooling, and then proceed from the compression zone of the press through the deduster metal check, through the tablet tester, through the air handling duct, and finally the air handling system. So generally 45 to 60 minutes and 8 to 10 zones.
Okay, good. Sounds good. We've got some more questions coming in. Someone is asking, how is drying accomplished after the WIP cycle?
So as I indicated, there are a couple ways to do drying. The most common way is simply by manipulating a compressed air wand through a glove port in the compression zone to blow off the water from the rinse water from the surfaces. There is the possibility to use a dehumidification system, a drying unit, heating unit on the incoming air. The downside of that is if you heat the compression zone, it often requires that it returns back to a nominal temperature, ambient temperature, before you can start again. So your downtime is going to be significant. So I think, I would tell you from our experience that compressed air remains really the predominant methodology, and only in some cases would the dehumidification system be utilized.
Okay, good. Next question. Is there a way to test the integrity of the containment prior to operating the system?
Sure, and that's an important point. So as I indicated, when you go to OEB4 and OEB5, we're using a barrier isolator, so really not just a window with a glove point in it, but an isolator. That isolator has inflatable seals. So we monitor the condition of those inflatable seals to ensure the integrity is maintained while the machine is in operation, and of course there's an alarm. Beyond that, there is a real-time monitoring of the negative pressure inside the compression zone. So we set a negative pressure, as I indicated, 80 to 100 pascals that the system will maintain precisely. And if there is any departure, there'll be an alarm. There is a leak test that you can activate before each batch to verify that when the machine has been reassembled, that the integrity of the containment is in place as a preset to run. So there are redundancies. There are ways to set it up and test it in front, and there are real-time provisions to monitor the containment while the machine is in operation.
Okay. Great. And I have one more question for you, Fred, if that's okay. And then looks like we're running out of time, so I think this is going to be the last question. Someone is asking, is it possible to direct material from a blender or peripheral system to the tablet press?
Yes. So as I indicated, we're seeing I think for a number of reasons, there's been an emphasis industry-wide in continuous process. And part and parcel to that is the continuous process of contained materials. So there's certainly a provision for a high containment system to work in the framework of a continuous process line. So that means there's a split butterfly valve, there's a continuous blender that's delivering material, which is proceeding through the valve and into the press. So it's very similar to how a continuous operation works with a standard press, but all the same requirements and design features of the contained press are going to be in play, including the peripherals. So it certainly adds an element of complexity, but there are certainly companies out there that are looking at continuous process of high potent products utilizing the type of contained presses that we talked about today.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Fred, for fielding all those great questions this afternoon. Thank you so much to the audience for submitting them. Just a reminder, if we did not get to your question today, and I'm sorry that we've run out of time, we will pass those questions along to Fred so that he can follow up at a later time. Just a final reminder to the audience, please let us know your thoughts on this presentation by answering our brief survey. It's going to appear on your screen shortly. Your candid answers are very appreciated and do help us craft future events. Just a reminder, this webcast will be available on pharmamanufacturing.com. Feel free to log in at any time. Please share it with your colleagues. We also encourage you to visit pharmamanufacturing.com to gain access to even more tools and resources aimed at helping you achieve on-the-job success. And on behalf of the folks at Pharma Manufacturing Magazine and at Course, I want to thank everyone for your attendance this afternoon, and have a great day.